You need to stop calling it procrastination, because throughout your life, you keep saying you're procrastinating, you're not able to do things, you're getting distracted, but it's not about procrastination. And I want to tell you this one story to really bring down this point. I was speaking to a client recently, and he kept telling me that he really wanted to study for the work that he was doing. He was in college and he was trying to just get his stuff done. And the thing is, like, he knew he needed to get it done, and he knew he needed to continuously work in order to be successful at what he wanted to do. And he really wanted his heart to be there, but he kept finding himself procrastinating. And he started to ask himself, what is going on? Why can't I just get myself together? And we started working with one another, and I kept asking him, prying him, why is it that he wants to do what it is that he's studying for? And he kept telling me, he's like, well, I know I really want to do this, and it's something that's really important, and I'm going to be able to make a difference. And he kept telling me all these blasé, fake answers, and I kept saying, there's something else. And he started to get a little annoyed at me because he kept starting to repeat himself. And I really wanted him to get annoyed, because what I really wanted him to do is to really dig deep and understand, why is it that he can't get himself to do it? Why can't he pull himself together in order to just sit down and do the work and study? And after pushing him and trying to pull it out of him, we finally came up with it. And until he said it, it really nothing else resonated. And I said, I appreciate you being honest with me for the first time. And he looked to the side and he shook his head and he said, yeah, me too. And it was such a transformation, because so many of us want to be doing things and we know what we're supposed to be doing, but for some reason we claim we're just procrastinating. Other things are more important, other things are distracting us, but really it comes down to different areas. And with my student, really what was going on is that he said to himself, he's not good at the studying that he wants to be doing. He's not good at that subject. And because of that, he kept procrastinating, kept pushing himself off. He was looking at other people and seeing how successful other people were, but didn't realize, you know what, I might not have it. And because of that, he didn't want to do it. And why would he blame him? Of course he didn't want to do it. He wasn't good at it. And what we need to start to ask ourselves is, what are we supposed to do? Because we blame it on procrastination, but maybe we're just not good at the thing that we want to be doing. And there's so many different ways we could go about it. And what we started to do is we started to pick up certain patterns that got him to procrastinate. And one of the things he noticed is that every time, because he had certain times throughout his day that he's supposed to be studying, and we started to think about what was going on before those times that he would end up procrastinating or showing up late and doing whatever it is that he was doing. And besides for the studying, is that he found himself on his phone. And what was interesting is that this isn't like one of those things that phones are terrible and phones are bad, which maybe they are and maybe they're not. Who knows? I'm sure that there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad. But what he recognizes that if I'm on my phone 15 minutes before I'm supposed to be studying, I'm going to show up late. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm just going to get lost in it. And we started to make a specific goal that when it comes to the goal that he wants to do in order to sit and study and learn whatever it is supposed to learn, the 15 minutes beforehand, he can't be on his phone. He could be hanging out with friends. He could be going on walks and be doing whatever he wants, but he just can't be on his phone. And this is one way, one trigger that we can start to figure out what is that we can start to do. And the fact that he acknowledged that he wasn't good at it, and the fact that he acknowledged that he was comparing himself to other people, we can now start to work on it and start to realize, you know what? We keep saying that it's procrastination. We keep blaming something else, but now we can focus on the real problem. How is it that we can get better? What is a frame we can start to think about to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to care about anybody else because I need to work on myself. You think about it, when we speak to our children, we want to speak to them, we want to give them support, and we want to tell them, don't think about anybody else, and you have to do what you have to do, all these nice things. But when it comes to ourselves, it's just a little bit more difficult. And we have to try to figure out what is it we can do? How is it we can start to shift that frame in order to allow us to see the success that we want, to be able to take the action that we want? Because if we're not taking the action, we're not going to get there. And that is one of the biggest things that so many people do is they just don't take action. And one of the biggest reasons is because they're maybe just not good at it. And what we have to realize is there are other reasons as well, though. Another reason that happens that's so common is the fear. You see, there's a fear factor in terms of, I want to be doing X, Y, and Z, but I might fail, or I might succeed, or I might I don't know what's going to happen. And because of that, they end up not taking the action. They blame it on procrastination, but really it's something else. It's the fear. And if you would ask them or ask somebody like realistically, well, if you were going to go do something, you're not going to succeed at it, then of course you're not going to want to do it. Of course, you're going to find whatever it is in your life to distract yourself from doing that thing. So we need to start to be honest with ourselves and ask ourselves certain questions, which we'll speak about in a second, on how it is we could pull out of ourselves why it is we're procrastinating. Because once we understand the point, one dot that's really holding everything else back, we can unplug it and then we could start to flow into it, because we really know it's not procrastination, it's something else. And the last point that so many people fall into, and this is something that I found myself doing, because one of the things that I'm starting to learn is I'm starting to learn Facebook ads. And if you go and start into Facebook ads, you start to listen to everybody who's failed at Facebook ads, and you tell them how difficult it was, and they start to talk about how hard it was and how much money you're going to end up spending and all these different beliefs around Facebook ads. And the truth is, you're going to have to spend money. It's one of those things, in order to test it out, unless you're doing it for somebody else or working for somebody else, you're going to have to put your own money into it. So when we have these beliefs about ourselves, the question is like, what is it we're going to do? And I found myself, whenever I started to take certain actions, and I would get to a certain point in the journey, and then I didn't know what was next. I didn't know, it wasn't an unknown or a fear in terms of like what would happen. I just didn't know what the next step was, or I got stuck and I just didn't know what to do next. I ended up finding myself really starting to procrastinate. And I remember there was one time I was one evening, and I kept going on my phone. I kept picking up my phone every time I had a tough time. And I realized after the third time, I have this pattern. Every time I'm starting to work, I don't know what to do, I just pick up my phone. As opposed to me like going to YouTube or calling somebody or reaching out to somebody who knows the answer to it. So what we have to start to recognize is it might not be a fear. It might not be we're not good at something. It just might be something unknown. And because it's unknown, we're going to direct ourselves to do something that is known, something that is going to entertain us, something that's going to give us that dopamine. So if we can start to understand this, then we have the ability to move forward, to start to not procrastinate, not because of the procrastination aspect, but we're fixing the issue, we're fixing the problem over here. So what questions can you ask yourself? What is it you can start to do? And this is one of the things that Dean Graziosi talks about. And he says, when you start to dig deep in terms of why you're doing something, you need to dig 7 layers deep, 5 to 7 layers deep in terms of what it is you're going to be doing. So if you want to say, I want to make $1 million. So ask yourself, why? Why do you want to make $1 million? Well, I want the money to be able to support my family and to do good with it, in order to give it to charity. Okay, nice. But why? Well, I want to be able to do it because, me as a person, it's my obligation to support my family, and and this cause really speaks to me, and I really want to help support them. Why? And if you could keep digging until you get to that core, to understand. And you know what's interesting? When it's real, when it's the hard thing to say. It's not just like the fluffy answer on the outside. It's what is really going on. What is that deep answer? And I remember with me, the biggest insights I've ever had with my coaches is when I was honest and I said something. When I said something out loud that I never said before, I was scared to say. What we need to start to figure out for ourselves is, what is it we're going to do? How is it we're going to be honest for ourselves? And if you start to tell yourself, and you're starting to do this journal prompt about asking yourself why, or you're starting to speak to somebody, or you're speaking to yourself, or you're recording a video to yourself and you're still stuck, give yourself this question. What if you did know? What would the reason be? And you might say, well, I don't know, Bennett, but ask it this way. What if you did know? Because so many times we used to put so much pressure on the answer, and because of that, we can't give ourselves an answer. But if we can start to say, hey, you know what? It's not about the answer. Let's take the emotion out of the answer, because if I did know, it's not true, but if I did know, that's how we trick our brains, it would probably be X, Y, and Z. And because of that, then we have the ability to start to move forward and to take the action. We start to understand why it is we're doing the things that we're doing, why it is we're procrastinating. And once we have that, then everything else changes. So ask yourself, why is it you're doing the thing you're doing? And if you're not sure really why, ask yourself, well, what if you did know why? What would be the reason? And I'm telling you, once you can figure out that point, that inner core about why it is you're holding yourself back, then you'll be able to move forward. If this is something that you resonate with, and if you are somebody who wants to try to figure out, what is my passion? What is something I could be doing next? Make sure to take a look at this next video where we speak about whether you should be going after your passion or not.